So I hope you enjoyed the work last week on logic models. We're going to talk about that a little bit more again this week. Had to change my place that I normally sit because it's afternoon now. I hope you can see this video. It looks a little dark on my iPad screen, but I was getting such a shadow since it's afternoon. I usually do the videos in the morning that I couldn't even see my face earlier, so I'm trying to make sure that I can, it's a whole different setup here in the front porch than it is in the back porch. So I'm sorry. I hope that you can see this video. So let's talk about what we're going to do this week. So last week we talked about logic models. We talked about needs assessment the week before that. And that's really the information that you need for your needs assessment. Really, the needs assessment is that first step of determining whether or not maybe a program is working, or if there's some sort of gaps in the services that people are providing. Okay, so that's really what your first project is about, is proposing a needs assessment to try to figure out how to remedy some of the gaps that people are experiencing in services. What we're going to start to do in this week's material is go beyond what we'll do in the needs assessment, and we're going to talk about formative and process evaluation, which are the evaluations of what's happening in a project that go beyond just the needs that people are experiencing. So it's really kind of the first steps in program evaluation, past the needs assessment, past the logic model. So again, we talked about that. We talked about the logic model a bit last week. Today's material, this week's material, you're going to start to think about that logic model a little bit more, and then start to figure out how we can do something about it. So let's talk about the kinds of evaluations that we're going to be talking about and you're going to be reading about this week. The first one is formative evaluation. Now I'm sure, I think almost everyone in here has taken 5203, and so you have talked about formative evaluation really in an assessment context. It's a little bit different in a program evaluation context just because of what we do, but the idea is pretty much still the same. Formative evaluation is really that informal day-to-day information that we get to look at, in program evaluation context, to look at the workings of the program that's under review. So the data that we get, just like in an assessment context, is used to make tweaks and make adjustments to the programming along the way, or really to get information about the adjustments that have been made kind of on the fly. So when we're using programs and when we're implementing programs in an agency or in some sort of context, we design the program in a way that we think it's going to work well, but then we don't really know exactly how it's going to work until we get into the context and start doing the program. And so sometimes you have to make adjustments. A formative evaluation is an assessment of what those adjustments are and whether or not they're working. Okay? So they're really the day-to-day informal kind of assessments that we can give to get data about the program and figure out if it's working, if it's not working, what changes need to be made, if the changes that we have made need to be working, or if experts are looking at the changes and saying, yeah, those are pretty good changes and they still meet the program goals. So again, why is the program being implemented as designed? If it's not, why not? And are those changes being made? Are they appropriate for the context that they're in? Okay. Then we move to process evaluations. Formative evaluation is kind of the informal, no real how-tos on it. It's just really a collection of information. Process evaluation is a little bit more formal, though, than formative evaluation. So if we've really done a good job with our needs assessment and the formative evaluations kind of along the way, then what we're really going to find is that process evaluation is going to go a little bit more smoothly than those kinds of things might have. So on first glance, it really appears that the bulk of a program evaluation should be on the outcomes of a program. Did the program meet its goals? Right? Is it providing the services that it said, and how are those services being provided, and is it working to meet the goals? But that's not the only thing that we need to look at in program evaluation. We also need to look at the process of what has happened. So process evaluation really looks at the implementation of the program over time. So how was the program implemented? Not just if there are any changes made and if they're appropriate or something, those informal kinds of things like the formative evaluation, but process evaluation looks systematically at those changes or systematically at the program and how it's being implemented to determine if that's appropriate and determine what has worked and why it has worked and why it has not worked. So really process evaluation has three goals. okay, or 3 kind of main areas that it focuses on. So what we're interested in collecting information on is describing the functioning of the program, then monitoring that function. So not just saying what the function of the program is, but actually systematically monitoring to ensure that the program is functioning in the way that it was designed in order to meet the goals and the outcomes that we want for people. And then also maintaining quality. That's the third thing that we're looking at in process evaluation. So quality, not just for, like, let's say it's implementation of some sort of program in a school or something like that. Not just is the program being implemented in a certain quality, but is every single person who is touching that program maintaining the quality of that program. So we know that there's a lot of individual variation in how people do things, but quality should not be the variation. And so process evaluation is the means by which we look to the quality of the program, regardless of whether or not there's variation. So this is just a very, very brief overview of formative evaluation and process evaluation in program evaluation context. There's a chapter reading for you, and of course slides as normal with a couple of small audio clips in them, and then a homework assignment. I want you to continue to work on your needs assessment. I will get you feedback very quickly. I'm making this video a couple of days early for you because I'm just a little bit ahead of you on making that, putting the information together. So I'll get you feedback on needs assessment kind of stuff. The more that you write, the more that I can give you feedback on. So you should be thinking really clearly now about your logic model. It's going to take, I know, a couple of weeks to put that together. You have approximately a month left for your needs assessment before that proposal is due. Okay, and so in a couple of weeks we'll have some peer reviews for that. So you should have your statement of the problem. You should be thinking really clearly about your logic model. And I also want to make sure that you have some sort of literature support. So it doesn't have to be a very, very in-depth literature review, but a couple, 3 pages of literature so we know what you're doing, why you're doing, and the theory behind that, and why you're putting those things together, or why you're thinking about the programs or the needs of your agency and the way that you're thinking about it. Okay?